Over the past year or so, I've compiled a list, an actual list of everything I think that Luna needs to implement for Luna 3.0. Universal Audio, consider this my formal wish list. And for everybody else, it's really important that you actually watch every one of these and comment on them, because Universal Audio is gonna see this, and this is the perfect public forum at this point for you to leave a comment and let Universal Audio know. Be sure to like the video so as many people as possible see this, as well as subscribe for all things Universal Audio. On to wishlist item number 1. Let's talk wishlist item number 1, and that is enable keyboard shortcuts for insert, sends, and outputs and unison preamp modules. And what I mean by that is, for the selected track, allow us to use a keyboard command like, say, command number 1, and that will automatically highlight and open the plugin picker for that insert. Or if you're in the sends tab, same thing, you can choose the send here. The reason I think that this would be so useful is because of devices like the SSL system or the Stream Deck systems, where you can create clever macros. So you could press, theoretically, command 1, it would automatically select this box in insert number 1, and then you can start typing the plugin, like say 1176. Now what's really cool about this is you can actually take this further with the Stream Deck macros and complete the whole thing. And so you could theoretically select the insert, have the macro input the direct name of the 1176 FET compressor, and press return, and it loads this plugin for you automatically. And I think a nice touch is if a plugin's already assigned, that it would actually open up the plugin GUI itself. So you close it, and if your track is selected, you press command 1, it's in insert slot 1, it pulls the plugin up, etc. All right, on to wishlist item number 2, and this one's gonna be a little less critical now with AI tempo detection, but I would love to see the tempo detection also have a keyboard shortcut for this tap icon rather than having to click. It would be great, again, for macro devices like the SSL system or the Stream Deck system to be able to have a button specifically for tap tempo, so you can tap it out rather than using the mouse to click. Now again, obviously, with the AI tempo detection itself, you can just perform and it's gonna recognize the performance tempo, but it would still be useful in general to have, and that's why it's made this list. If you're like me, or if your Apollo's in a rack, you might not be able to physically access the talkback button assignment on your Apollo, and as a result, you have to use the software, and it's buried in the software. You have to go to a specific location, and that is over here in this monitor panel here. You can show the control room is what they call it, and then you have access to turn the talkback on via software there. This is the perfect candidate for a keyboard shortcut. Being able to just press it once on something like the UFA and it toggles it on, and then press it again, it can toggle it off. That just makes too much sense to me, so that should make its way into Luna 3.0. All right, now I know this video is very much a constructive criticism of Luna. However, Luna is very much a complete DAW. I've completed a lot of music with it, and I really enjoy working with it. Now, if you want to take your workflows with Luna in its current form to the max, check out my Luna Master course at thestevekinney.com. With it, you get a dedicated place to always have the latest information on the most recent updates, along with my SSL and Stream Deck control profiles, so you can learn Luna with the tools that I use right alongside me. Go to thestevekinney.com to learn more. Next up, another quality of life improvement. When you go to rename tracks, right, you can double click and then use the command button to jump to the next track and back and forth, command down or up, right? You can toggle back and forth. But to start that whole process off, you have to double click in the first place for the selected channel. There's been plenty of times that I've been editing and working in the timeline or in the mixer here, and I'm working with my hands on the UF1, and I might select a track here, and it's got a strange name, right, from the session studio, like 16di.2. It would be so great to be able to press a button here and just start typing rather than having to move my mouse and then double click. That would enable a tactile way of working and renaming. Of course, once you double click and you open this, there is a keyboard shortcut to jump to the next track and back and forth. That's just the command up and down arrows. But to prompt that in the first place is kind of what I think is necessary and a needed quality of life improvement, and that's why it made the list. The next one is another keyboard shortcut request, and that is having the ability to select the instrument detection type via a keyboard shortcut. So you press a button and this popover can pop up, and then you just use the up and down arrow keys to be able to select through this menu. Now you can't currently use the up and down arrow keys. You see it here, I'm pressing up and down and it's just toggling between nothing, but I'd love to just be able to press a button and this pops up and I can cycle through here again, because macro devices, this would just speed up the whole thing, right? The more we can add macro capability and function, the faster and more useful that these devices become. The next one's a strange one to me. Somebody pointed it out that, you know, for the better part of since day one, we've had the exact same colors in the color wheel, and I couldn't really agree more. Like sometimes I find myself running out of colors. So can we get a full color wheel? And also, can we make it so that the color wheel can be accessed via keyboard shortcut? This would allow for faster visual organization, again, more macro-based track coloring capabilities, and it would improve session navigation as a whole. Now, before we move on to the next category for improvement, I want to talk about the theme here. So far, it's been keyboard shortcuts and macros, right? So wouldn't it be great if they developed, or if Universal Audio develops, a dedicated macro system for Luna? Because, you know, with the SSL device here, this is an HID device. So when you create a macro, it's as fast as your keyboard's input. Stream Deck is not. Stream Deck is a USB device and it operates a lot slower. So when you create a macro here, sometimes you can actually see the text being prompted on screen when you press the macro. So if we had a native in-house macro designer, we could design macros for things that would not necessarily be keyboard shortcut enabled, potentially, right? And the other thing is that you can still assign those macros to the Stream Deck or to the SSL. It would just be faster and more reliable as a whole because you're triggering a macro from the native software rather than from an external software like SSL 360 or the Stream Deck software. So yeah, a macro builder would be fantastic. All right, for our next category, we're going to be talking the mixer section, routing and monitoring. These are all going to be aimed at that. So the first one is going to be a dedicated mixer channel for the click track. Now, I recently made a video on how to kind of sort of hack what I'm about to request, but it would just be great if this was natively built in. So what am I talking about here? Well, first, the click track, right? To access the click track, it's actually in this little breakout panel from the click section here in the transport section. If I click on cues, you can see that I have exactly the same mixer parameters that you'd find in the mixer for every other track. Like for my kick track here, right? I have the main fader, which would be this fader here. And then I have a series of cue faders, which I have right here. Wouldn't it be great if this was just built into the mixer, just like this main master track here, just to the right of it? Maybe it had a track called click. And instead of being accessible via pop-out menu, it'd be accessible just natively within the mixer. This is gonna be a cleaner UI. It's gonna be a cleaner user experience. It's gonna be great because it's gonna be accessible via control surfaces. And there's no reason that shortcuts like the keyboard shortcut K, there's no reason that that still couldn't control the click track itself. And there's also no reason that you couldn't have a hide functionality. Like just like I can hide this track here, right? I can right click this acoustic track and choose hide selected track and it disappears, right? There's no reason that that stuff can't already work and that this click pop out menu can still live there, right? There's no reason that that can't be the case. Now I'm gonna let you in on a secret. I actually believe that they might be working on this already, and you really have to understand how Luna's naming structure works for tracks to know why I think this. So let me show you. So anytime you have two tracks with the same name, it assigns a number. So let me show you here. I'm gonna come up with a track and literally just call it track. I'm gonna create one, and there you go, it says track. Now, if I create another track with the same name, now it assigns a number directly after that track. So whenever I started doing this workflow where I'd bring the click track into the timeline, which you can find in my 10 tips video on Luna workflows, I actually find a way to hack this into existence. And what you would do is you'd create a new track, right? And you'd call it click. Now watch what happens. I am not adding a number after this, but if I hit create, now it adds a number. So that's telling me that somewhere in the Luna mix engine, there's already a track dedicated to the click. So why not just bring it into the mixer? It makes too much sense. Now from a user experience, this is probably what it could look like, right? You see here, I'm gonna drag it over to this other side. When I hit play, you can see that this track is right here and it's playing through the main track. And now I have access right on my fader. That would mean I also have access via Q. And that would make this, again, a whole lot faster for everyone. It's natively accessible in the mixer, and that's why it's made the list. And piggybacking off that, I have to say this because if you notice the main track here doesn't have an output selector. Now that's totally okay. I understand why that's the case, but the next request is make sure that this click track has an assignable output. The reason that that would be useful is because if you're someone like me, or if you're someone operating like a smaller commercial studio, right, you could have the output go directly to something like the Behringer P16 mixer breakout box, right? So you can have personal mixers that can receive the click just automatically, and you wouldn't have to do anything crazy. Because currently the way that you'd have to do this is you'd have to send it to one of the queues and then pan it either left or right to go to a specific channel in the stereo field. I don't want to confuse everybody with that, so I'm going to just move on to the next one. But if you know the Behringer systems and you know what I'm talking about, if you know, you know. All right, next up, let's talk about hardware inserts and the nuance that they should really fix. So if you call up the hardware inserts plugin, it works. It's just like the plugin that you'd find in Logic or Studio One, Pipeline, right? Where you can assign the output and the input and calculate the sample delay and etc., right? But there's one thing that kind of plagues Apollo users and potentially other interfaces too, where you load this up and you have to go into your hardware interfaces control panel and mute the channels there because you hear it through the DAWs engine plus the Apollo's engine. So what I'd love to see is as you select your channel here, that in console, it also controls the mute automatically. So you assign, say, analog 7 and 8 to be the input source for the return on, the plugin, and then that plugin goes in here and automatically mutes the channel in console for you. That makes too much sense, being that this is a native plugin for Universal Audio hardware. Now, obviously, if you don't have Universal Audio hardware, then that wouldn't happen, right? It can't control other companies' interfaces, but being that there's the Apollo and it's all digitally connected, surely there's something that they can do to prompt that muting automatically, and that's why it's made the list. All right, next up, I'd love to see some sort of a pre-fader or post-fader mixer designation. So we've got solo, global solo toggle, an overload indicator. I would love for another box just like that to be right here that says pre or post, depending on what mode you're in for your meters. Now, why would that be useful? Well, it's because when you hit play, right, you can see the meters moving. And the only way you'd know if you're in pre or post fader is if you start pulling down the fader and you see your signal level change. And then to change it, you gotta go into the settings here and you can go to options and you can change your pre and post fader just like that. You can change this by, clicking. And once you click and you go back to your session, like obviously your metering remains regardless of whether this is up or down. For those of you asking why would you want to be in one or the other, well, pre-fader metering is very useful while tracking because you can see your signal levels regardless of the mix that you've created, and you can know whether or not tracks have been clipped. But if you're in mixing, a lot of times I find that I like to be in post-fader metering because it gives me a better idea of like where my actual levels are at for the mix. And to take this one step further, beyond having just a designated spot where you can see and toggle right here, you guessed it, we should have a keyboard shortcut for this as well, because I would love to be able to assign this to one of the buttons here on my virtual SSL console. Moving on to the next category, and that is recording, comping, and versioning. All right, so this is gonna be a hot topic. Obviously, everybody and their brother is gonna say that they want better comping in Luna, but like, what does that even mean? Go out on a limb and guess that a lot of people are gonna ask for like the Logic swipe thing. I actually hate that. I hate that so much, and that's one of the biggest reasons I actually left Logic, because it's not uncommon for me to have a ton of takes. Not necessarily because I'm just doing 70, 80 takes, but I'm going section by section and tracking just verses and just choruses for vocals or for other instruments. As a result, I'll have a lot of take lanes. And if I'm in Logic and I have 60 take lanes, well, I also probably have 50 tracks. Now all of a sudden I have to scroll like a madman to try to find what I'm working on, and it's just inefficient. In addition to that, it also locks the clips. And so you have to then bounce it out. And yeah, now I know there's been a lot of versions since I left Logic, and so maybe they've improved it a bit, but still, I don't know that the swipe method is for me. Now, that said, there's also no reason that they couldn't do both, right? Come up with something unique where you can have both methods if you so choose. I think that would win everybody over, and it would make everybody happy. Now, what do I want to see? Well, for one, I do like the manual version system where I can just designate and name something the comp version if I want. I really do like the way that this works. Now, how do you comp? Well, obviously you manually select what you want and hit, Control C, and you got to go up to your designated comp lane and paste it in. It's entirely manual, but it works. And the great thing that I like about it is that while you're editing things down, it doesn't lock your take, right? I can still add clip fades. I can still expand and contract the clip itself. I want to see all of that stay because editing is really fast here. But what I would really love to see is just a simple send to comp button. And of course, you guessed it, I also want this to be keyboard shortcut enabled. So I can go through here, select what I want, press one button, and it bounces up to a dedicated comp version. And that could be maybe another button here right next to this little plus icon. Maybe you can just designate it with a right click button. You right click and assign it as the comp. And then every time you press that shortcut, it jumps it up to that comp lane. And if you really want to make this extra nice and extra special, maybe when you go into comp mode, maybe there's a temporary track lane that kind of pops up, and that's where you see these other versions. And the main track lane gets populated as you send things up to the comp lane. Whatever happens, I'm sure it's going to be well thought out because I'm going to go ahead and assume that comping is the biggest ask right now for people who use Luna. And so I'm sure that they're putting a lot of stock to it, and I can't wait to see what they come up with. As of right now, you can start and stop recording, go to the next marker, previous marker, toggle the click, toggle the count in, and pre-roll. So it's extremely basic. Now, we don't have to get extremely complex. As a matter of fact, I've just written down what I think would make this incredibly useful. Here's a few. Create new version, previous version, next version, duplicate track without content, toggle record ready and input monitor, go to next bar or previous bar. There are so many times when I'm recording myself in the booth that I want to be able to just jump back a bar, not a whole marker, but just a bar from the marker, as well as being able to toggle off. And when I'm doing track stacks, being able to duplicate the track that I'm already working on and have set up and just duplicate it without the content. That would make for extremely fast track stacking. And I think that those would really complete the feature as it is right now. And while we're talking about track stacks, one thing that would go incredibly quick would be to have a thing called extract all versions into separate tracks. And what do I mean by that? Well, Luna has this really, really sweet, unique feature where you can loop record. So I'm just gonna show you what happens here. So if I have this track enabled and I hit record here, you can see it starts recording no problem. But you can see that as I start recording, right, it's just gonna keep looping, and you notice that it's adding take versions, and the list keeps building and building and building. And so why this is really cool is because I could theoretically loop record a chorus and lay down 6 harmony passes all right in a loop and just lay them down. But to get them out of that track, I have to manually create new tracks, copy and paste them, It would just be so cool and so fast if you could press one button, extract all versions into new tracks, and it creates a track for each new version that was added. Oh my gosh, that would save so much time. And low key, I also think this would make it a standout feature for Luna and something that really differentiates it from other DAWs out there. So I think that this is a really, really cool thing that should be added for Luna version 3. All right, the next request here is actually harder to demonstrate, and that is fixing the headphone cue playback behavior. So like you can see here, like if I have my track and it's armed, you can see that there's a level coming in. If I were to send this to Q2, right? In Q2, it would be receiving my live input source signal, but on playback, I would be sending this recorded audio not only to main, which could theoretically also be part of the cue. And you can see the signal level here is actually like 2 places, right? It's going here, it's hitting the main track. And so this on screen is kind of demonstrating what I'm talking about. But what happens is we'll set a level perfectly for a performance here, and you can hear yourself live. But upon playback, now you're hearing this track go not only directly to this track's cue, but you're also hearing it here. And so like the fix for that is to pull this fader down all the way, right? Just pull that fader down. And now you can see that it's not doubling up. The signal's only going to one place at a time. And while that would certainly fix the issue during tracking, right? Like you hit playback and they still hear their playback audio at the same level they initially heard it while they were performing with the headphone cue. It still should be more seamless in my opinion. I think that this is something they should try to solve because again, the solution is quite complex. If you didn't know how to solve it, like you'd probably just get frustrated. And so, yeah, I think that maybe look into that one. All right, next up, let's talk about the control surface integration. One thing that's been plaguing me from the start, and this is kind of silly, but it's the scrub wheel. So like you can see the scrub wheel is jumping bar to bar to bar. That's cool, but it's like super jumpy. And the thing is that I have this gorgeous UF1 and the jog wheel is amazing. It's so smooth, it's butter, and it's heavy, so it feels nice, but it's so touchy. So I'd really love to be able to use this jog wheel as a jog wheel. Personally, I believe that if I were comping and it was actually a smooth jog, I could jog right up to where I want to go, press the keyboard shortcut for a split. So I'd split the clip on one side, go to the end of where I want to be, split the clip again. And so you could get into this really nice two-handed workflow where you could tactile edit your way through comping. And I think that that would certainly make the tedious process of comping more fun, provided that it works good. So yeah, scrub would be awesome. The next ask is going to be a bit of a big one, I think, because it involves reaching out to solid state logic. Solid state logic, I have a wish list video for you guys too. So if you want to see that video, be sure to subscribe. I would love to see native UC1 support. I think that that would differentiate Luna as a whole entirely. And there's really no reason that this shouldn't be a thing. SSL, you would sell more UC1 units, Luna and Universal Audio, you guys would see a whole influx of users who would be really interested in your console extensions. The idea being is that you have this nifty console section here, and you can load a channel strip like the API Vision channel strip. But wouldn't it be cool if you could load an SSL channel strip and lo and behold, everything natively works for the selected track in line within the Luna mixer? I think it just makes too much sense. All right, next I'd love to see a plugin control editor be implemented for obvious reasons, right? Like not every control here needs to be accessible. And now the reason I bring this up is because if I choose the 1176 plugin control here on my MCU device, I obviously have to read what parameters are where on this device. And I think natively, like they've done a good job of implementing their own plugin control. It's less for like controlling a UAD2 plugin and more about all of the other brands out there. Like, if I tried to control like a Fab filter or something, right? Like that would be impossible with this. But the idea is that, I'm probably not likely gonna reach for certain types of controls with something like the 1176. on this device, right? All I really want to be able to do is grab the input, output knobs, attack and release, maybe the ratio, I don't know. But the idea is like, can you give us the control to be able to map what we would prefer to have mapped rather than having everything mapped and it being hard to look at and hard to understand? It actually slows me down to try to use this implementation. And that's not a problem with the way that Universal Audio implemented the control. It's more so like, we need a better system of control. There should be like a virtual rack mounted 1176 in my rack right here that I can control every instance of the 1176 digitally. Like, that would make a lot of sense, right? But for now, we have MCU, and I would like the ability to control more personally. So anyways, that's why it made the list. It is more of a UAD2 request, honestly, but I'd love to see UAD be able to fire off meter data for this plugin here. So if you don't know what this is, basically, if you have the UC1, you have the different areas of it that you can assign to control plugins, right? And it's really cool, it's nifty, but it is a VST wrapper. And so what you have to do is you have to go in for each VST and configure them. So you can see right here, if I pull up a plugin, right? Like let's find Universal Audio, where are you? You can see that I don't do this very often. So here, as this plugin has loaded, and it's also loaded in a funky size, it's like the wrapper's kind of done some weird stuff there. But beyond that, you can see that right here is everything that's assignable to these buttons on the UC1. And so you can assign just by dragging. I have my input, output, attack, release, and this is cool because I can just reach for it on the device and control it immediately. That's great. However, you'll notice right here, assignable meter data. If I try to expand that, I can't get the meter data. And what would meter data be useful for? Well, this VU meter, when it reacts on screen, I could see it right here on the real life meter here. So if I open up the plugin, I can control it. I can get real meter data readouts right here without having the plugin window open. I think that that's really cool. A lot of other people think it's really cool and really helpful, and it's something that is necessary to implement. So that'd be great. Let's move on to the next category, and that is MIDI. Let's talk MIDI for a minute. On to the next category, and that is MIDI. Let's talk about improvements to the MIDI system. Now, I might be one of the very few people that really enjoy the way that MIDI is laid out. Like, strangely enough, I don't like having a dedicated MIDI editor just because I don't really work with a whole lot of MIDI. And so like I jump to a new window and it feels like you're entering a new DAW. Right? Anytime you go into Logic and use the MIDI editor there, it's a completely separate timeline, separate window, etc. And so I've always admired the integrated MIDI piano roll in the timeline. I always thought that this was nice. However, I also understand why some people would find it frustrating because it doesn't show you everything all at once, and a lot of stuff feels like it's missing. For example, like some of the MIDI assignments, like you have to open up this separate window and then choose what you want to display across the bottom here, like program changes and MIDI CC controllers and whatnot, right? Like it's all there, but just accessing it is not like other DAWs. And as a result, I think a lot of people think that you can't do those things in Luna. Like I think they think it's just missing entirely. A lot of times they just don't know where to look for it. And so obviously there needs to be some sort of an improvement. It would be great if there was a dedicated piano roll, but we could still access everything in the timeline too. I'd be a big fan of that. I think that would be an elegant solution. Everybody would be happy. Piggybacking off of that, the next thing, I actually think this might actually just be a broken element of Luna entirely. So you have this little audio in selector here, and I think what this was ultimately trying to do, right? You'd have your MIDI output that you could take and send out of the box entirely and go to like a hardware device like a Juno or whatever MIDI device that you have. And then if it had analog outputs, you could route that back through and you'd have an analog signal like all in line with this MIDI track. But the one thing that I've found is that it's like just not delay compensated. So it's just totally out of time. And then additionally, if you wanted to print that or commit to that, you'd have to add a secondary track and just record it into the timeline. And then, what I just said, right? It's out of time. It's not in sync. I think that's just a particular thing right now. Also, sorry, you might hear my dog in the background. But that's just a particular thing to this feature. I just think they need to revisit it and fix it. I think it's just broken. All right, moving on to the next category, the export and delivery workflows. Let's talk about those for a minute. And with the first request, I'm going to ask for something called a render queue or render states. Now, the whole idea with this is that you could have different states that you could add to the render queue, and then you press one button and everything starts rendering out for you. What I mean by that is like, okay, I have my master here, I'm ready to mix, I can add it, and we're good. But what about an instrumental? Well, you can only really export either the tracks all at once, right? Like I could add these and export those. That's cool. But if I wanted to have a true instrumental, I'd have to go into the timeline or the mixer and actually like mute out certain elements. But if I mute this in the mixer, then it's gonna make sure that that's muted for this bounce out too. So what I'd like to see is having the ability to basically have snapshots of the mixer state and add those into a queue list to render. That would mean that I could render out the master, the instrumental master, any sort of special stems, and all formats like MP3 and WAV, 16-bit WAV, 44.1 for CDs, etc. Right? Like I could do that all at once. I just got to create the queue list in the render. And then of course, if we refer back to the macro builder, we could also utilize the macro builder potentially to do this whole thing as well. And I really think that that would save a lot of time. There's actually a third-party plugin currently that you can buy that does this, I think, for Pro Tools. And I just think that's crazy. Like Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve has it figured out for video production. I think we should figure it out for audio production. That'd be great, and that's why it made the list. Piggybacking off of the idea of exporting out tracks, one thing that needs to be fixed here is when you go to export tracks or stems, it automatically assigns the track name, which is fine, like that's cool. I have my order here, it's kick in, kick out, snare top, snare bottom. And you can see that it follows that here in the export list. But the problem is that there's no number in front of it. Once you actually export these out, it's gonna go alphabetically in your Finder window, right? So if you were someone receiving what I just exported, you'd have to spend the first 10 minutes of your new session after you import your tracks, you'd have to like reorganize everything. So it'd be really cool to be able to have a little prompt within this dialog box that says like retain track order, and you click it and it just assigns like 01, 02, 03. Now this is something that tracking studios seem to already handle themselves. Like they'll write 01, 02 as part of the track name during tracking, which is fine. That's a solution too. But hey, if I don't have to do it manually, it would certainly be great if the computer could do it for me. Additionally, I would love to be able to have like tags and or the ability to get rid of the automatic naming of the project here. That would be great too. All right, quickly, let's talk about session navigation and timeline behavior. First up, let's talk about fixing the loop behavior. Now, currently in Luna, if you didn't know it, your bar beat ruler right here, this bright blue selector, this is what the loop function actually seems to loop in reality, right? And obviously the loop bar, if you see this little yellow icon, that's what you would assume loops. However, it follows this blue one. And what I think they were trying to do when it was initially implemented is make it so that like if you were playing and editing, right, you could have this section be looped, but you could go through and edit elsewhere, and you could update the loop, because there is a keyboard shortcut for that in the menu. If you go in here to transport, it says update loop and loop select. And so I think what they were trying to do is make it so that you could loop things as you go with keyboard shortcuts, but the function just totally doesn't seem to function correctly. So might want to look into that one. And jumping off of that, I would love to see locators. It's similar to Pro Tools. It would be separate from markers, but like you can see here in my project, I have markers here to identify the verse and the pre-chorus, the chorus, and the turnaround. But a locator would be really cool because I could have like little moments, and it would become really useful for tracking. Like I could have a locator for 2 bars before the start of the verse. I could have a locator for midway point through the verse. So as you're tracking your session player, they could be, hey, could you take me to the second bar in the verse? And you wouldn't have to manually click. You could just use the locators. I think that would be a welcomed addition and really helpful in general for tracking. All right, let's talk remote collaboration for a moment. I would love to see Universal Audio come up with some sort of listen to DSP based processor. This would be a unique proposition for Apollo users, because if you're trying to do any sort of collaboration and you're using your Apollo, you already know how difficult it is to try to get Zoom to cooperate with Apollo and also get high quality audio. And so if Universal Audio came up with their own first party solution where they have their own listen to maybe competitor, right? That's an instant purchase for me, because I do a lot of one-on-ones. I do a lot of remote mixing, and I work with people remotely. And sometimes like they may even want to do some tracking remotely too. And in that situation, you run into a weird thing where you have to turn off the features that make the Apollo strong in the first place, which is zero latency, right? The whole reason for that is your live audio is actually living on the device, and it's not living within your host computer. You're not hearing the round trip with zero latency. You're hearing the audio go directly into the Apollo, be processed by the Apollo, and spit back out of the Apollo. It's never in the system. And so whenever you try to use something like Audio Mover's Listen To, when you turn off that functionality, now they're hearing all sorts of latency with your live audio against playback audio, and it's just completely out of sync because of latency. So what I would love to see is a DSP enabled plugin that lives on the Apollo, very similarly to what they did with SonarWorks here. It would be really cool if there was some sort of extra DSP processor that you can turn on, and now what you hear at home out of your headphones is what the listener can hear through Listen To. That would be amazing. That would be an instant purchase from me, and that's why it's made the list. All right, for our last category, I want to think even bigger. I want to talk about the platform as a whole, that is Universal Audio, U82, and U80X. I would love for U82 and U80X to become like a platform. I would love U82 and U80X to be more of like a platform for development, similar to AAX DSP, right? Like I would love for that to be a thing, and basically open the entire platform up to developers, release an API or a dev kit, right? An SDK that people can go out and just develop for in the first place, and then submit for approval to Universal Audio. I think that this would dramatically increase the functionality of Luna as a whole, because now like my other third-party plugins can also potentially operate in real time. And like, for example, FabFilter, right? Like I could still arm a track and have FabFilter running. Now, I know that that's much easier said than done. Maybe that's a U83 functionality. Maybe that's something that's a little further off, but it's certainly something that should be talked about, because like Pro Tools HDX and Luna, there's really nothing else out there that can offer this sort of integrated workflow with real-time latency an where you can have the plugin just assign it into an insert, you turn input monitoring on, and it automatically goes from a CPU-based processing plugin to an accelerated real-time processing plugin. Once you work that way, you never want to go back. It's the coolest way to work. Now, I know that Universal Audio already partners with companies like Softtube and Brainworks, and they do their thing, but it seems like the development cycle is pretty slow for that. And now I don't know, but it seems like it's a true collaboration in the sense that like these guys have meetings and they talk and they discuss and they work through and they decide what they're going to do. Whereas if they just had an SDK and there was parameters, anybody could go out and develop and then submit for approval. I think ultimately this would expand the ecosystem as a whole, and it would certainly make Luna really compelling, because now you're not limited to just Universal Audio plugins in real time. You can have whatever's out there so long as it's been developed for. And last up on the list is cross compatibility. I think it would be so cool for Universal Audio to be the leader. I mean, they have a unique opportunity with Luna being such a new DAW, right? Create the standard for cross compatibility between programs. It would be so cool if a Luna file could open in Pro Tools and Pro Tools files could open in Luna and vice versa. It's like, look, Pro Tools is never going anywhere. So there's no reason for Pro Tools to worry about having this compatibility between other DAWs. But it doesn't make sense for me to have Pro Tools HDX at home here where I have an ISO booth in my control room. Like, it's just not gonna happen. I don't think that that hurts Pro Tools. I still have to have their software, and I do, and it would be so great for me to be able to open a Pro Tools file and also be able to open it elsewhere. So maybe there's something that Universal Audio can develop that's so cross-compatible that other people can jump on board. So in Pro Tools, the next edition of Pro Tools, maybe they adopt that file format as something that can be opened in Pro Tools. And basically, they start the foundations that everyone else will adopt. That would be really clever. I think that that would make the longevity of Luna as a product pretty much infinite. I think that that would be a really clever thing to do in general, is to try to push for that to become the standard. Let's be honest, for everybody watching, Avid, if Avid's watching, SSL, Universal Audio, everybody, if you're watching, you can't forget that this is about the users. We know you want to sell things. We get it. We know you want to sell us products. You know what sells a lot of products is something that works really well. It seems like in the audio industry specifically, there's been a trend of everything becoming more proprietary. And like, I get it, right? You want to keep us in the ecosystem. You want to sell more plugins and hardware, and it all works together. But you can't forget about the end goal, the number one goal, and that's making workflow better. If you make a product that actually improves workflow and focuses less on just being proprietary, that wins. If you have a product that is just so good, it doesn't matter if it's, it doesn't matter about the proprietary thing. People are going to continue to go back to it. If your products work together so well, you're going to retain users because it's cool. It's good that you're working with these other companies. Like, you want to be the company that's happy to work with every other company, because that means I know if I buy your products, I know it's going to consistently work with everything else, instead of the opposite, where it's like, if I buy your thing, oh, now I got to get everything Universal Audio. I got to get everything SSL. I got to get everything Softtube, right? As a matter of fact, it's actually one of the reasons I did not go with the Console 1 system. Now, I don't want to be too negative here, but like, it actually like turned me off at the idea that, to work the controller, I had to have a lot of their plugins. I know that that's not like totally the case, but that proprietary idea and mindset, I stay far, far away from when I can. It basically means like your aura as a company is like, you're like me, right? Like, I feel like you'd relate to me more. You just want to make stuff that works and is cool. So I just had to throw that out there. That's my perspective on it. Moving on. All right, well, we made it to the end. Let me know if there was something that I missed. Leave it in the comments. They're gonna see it. And I'll encourage you, if you find a comment that has your wish list item, like, hit the like button on that comment, because we could use the like button as a way of showing demand for said feature. And I think that that would be really cool, because then they could prioritize it and then they could actually implement these things. Now, it wouldn't totally surprise me if a few of these wish list items made its way into the next Luna update for sure. Like I said, with the click track thing, I stumbled upon the way that it renames my new track. Like, that's pretty obvious that there's something in the background that click track already exists, right? So I would not be surprised. If you found this video cool, hit the like button. Again, subscribe for all things Universal Audio and Luna. Check out thestevekinney.com for the latest presets and my Luna Master Course, or to book one-on-one time with me directly. Appreciate you guys watching. See you in another video. Cheers.